What's up everyone and welcome back to the AD Academy. Now in this new series I'm making a YouTube version of my written ADC guide I made. I made it a few years ago, but I recently updated it for season 11. Now in the YouTube series it will be divided in episodes, and each episode will cover another chapter or topic I covered in the written guide. If you are interested, you can always check out the written ADC guide in the description below. That way you can have all the information right now, but if you prefer, feel free to follow this series instead. So for this episode, I'm gonna talk about the types of AD carries or marksmen, whatever you prefer, the different bot lane comps, and seeing what beats what. So a little rock, paper, scissors. But before we start, please hit the subscribe button if you like this video. Alright, so let's get into it. What types of AD carries are out there? You have the hard AD carry, the hyper AD carry, and the support AD carry. Now you might have heard about different categories, but this is the way I prefer to categorize them. So first let's talk about the hard AD carry. These AD carries are insanely good early game, but they fall off later on. Their goal is to snowball out of control and win before the enemy can outscale them. They're vulnerable to CC, and if not going all in, they can also lose to sustain. The best examples are Miss Fortune and Draven. Now next let's talk about the hyper AD carries, because these are the exact opposite of the hard AD carries. Which means they are not strong early, they are much weaker, but the longer the game goes on, the stronger they get, so they can actually outscale the hard AD carry. Now their goal is to survive laning phase and pop off later on. So if you are a hyper AD carry and you're playing against a hard AD carry, just play like a bitch, play as safe as possible early on in the game so you can easily outscale them. If you die a lot against a hard AD carry, it will be much harder because they will be able to snowball the game out of control and probably win before you can even change the outcome. Now the best examples of hyper AD carries are Vayne and Twitch. And last but not least, we have the support AD carry. Now they are kind of special because their ult usually doesn't really do any damage or much damage, but it's rather used to set up free kills. Now they're not as strong late game as real hyper carries, but they do outscale hard AD carries in a lot of situations, and they do provide CC. They are best combined with a support that also provides CC because of the CC train they can get then. And this is always like fun for a jungler in your game. If you have a lot of CC, you can set them up for free kills. So yeah, there you have that. Then their goal is to use their ults, of course, hit them so you can set up free kills, maybe even for yourself because you're an AD carry after all. The best examples are Ashe and Sivir. So now that we've covered the types of AD carries, let's categorize them all. So right here we see a graph with 3 circles, like the hard AD carries, the hyper AD carries, and the support AD carries. In the circle of hard AD carries we can see Draven, Lucian, Miss Fortune, Caitlyn, Jhin, and I've put Graves in there as well, because in season 11 I've seen people play Graves again on the bot lane. Then in the circle of hyper carries and hard carries, you've got Quinn and Tristana. That's because Tristana actually scales pretty well, but she can also be strong at level 2, and she can snowball depending on the support you have. But if you get a few kills early, then yeah, you can actually snowball the game pretty hard, as well as scale later on in the game. Quinn is kind of the same. She's pretty strong early, and she doesn't really scale that much. I mean, she scales in another way. She scales in terms of roaming possibilities. Then you've got the hyper AD carries. These are quite a lot of them. The closer a champion is to another circle, the more I think it kind of almost belongs to that subgroup as well, but not quite. Like for example, Ezreal. I've put Ezreal on the top portion of the hyper AD carry circle, close to the hard AD carry, because if you do get a kill or two early on as Ezreal, you can also like snowball the game out of control. And same for Senna a bit. They are both quite weak early game, but if you do happen to get kills, they can snowball the game out of control. And then at the bottom part, of course, we've got all the real hyper carries. Then on the left, we've got Xayah. She's more of a hyper carry, but kind of also a support carry because her E. So you can stun people, which can set your jungler up for free ganks, or your support maybe if you have brand support or something like that. Because mages tend to be played support in Season 11 anyway. And then you've got the real support AD carries. I've put them all actually in the same circle as hyper carries, because they can scale pretty well too in the later game. So yeah, there's that. If you have any questions about the graph, hit me up in the comment section down below. So next we're going to talk about the bot lane compositions, because especially in the laning phase, the support plays a bigger factor in figuring out how you should play the lane than the AD carry. So for the different kind of comps, I've got them categorized as poke and trade, catch and all in, and sustain. So first let's talk about poke and trade. They generally go for shorter trades from a distance. However, they will lose longer trades. So their goal is actually doing what the name suggests, to poke until the enemy is low enough so you can finish them off. A good example of this would be Ezreal and Karma. So the next one is catch and all in. Now these are the bot lanes that can actually catch you off guard and kill you before you can move again. The goal is for a catch and all in to wait for your support, if you're playing AD carry that is to wait for your support to land his kills so you can follow up on them and kill them in one go, or at least bully them out of lane. I guess the best example of this one is Draven Leona. And last but not least, we have the sustain comp. These provide shields and heals or early lifesteal. The goal is to go for shorter trades because you will automatically win these because you can heal back up or negate the enemy's damage with shields. An example of this would be Vayne Yuumi. So, but that doesn't really mean that there's a composition who don't have more than one of these categories. Let's look at Varus and Nami, for example. If you look at it, Varus can poke from a distance, and so can Nami with her like heal thing, and she can power up the Varus auto attacks. So they can be kind of poke / trade, but they are also sustain because of the Nami heals. And after level 6, they also turn into an all-in comp. So these two actually combined are poke, sustain, and all-in, which is a pretty good combination, but unfortunately right now in Season 11 I don't see Nami being a good support, so that's too bad. But yeah, now it's time for some rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so figuring out which composition beats what is actually, like I said, like rock, paper, scissors. Although it's quite a bit different. The big difference is that in rock, paper, scissors, there's no discussion. Rock beats scissors, paper beats rock, and scissor beats paper. Now in League, it's not quite that simple. That's because, let's say on paper sustain beats poke, but what if the sustain comp is playing so much worse than the poke/trade comp? Well, then the poke/trade comp obviously wins the game. I mean, at least the lane. So it's not as easy as rock, paper, scissors because it's not black and white. If one comp plays really bad, then yeah, the other comp wins, no matter what. But yeah, this is just all on paper. In theory, who should win against what. Let's first talk about poke and trade versus catch all in. What happens then? If the lane is played out correctly, poke should beat all in. But it is a dangerous game, I must say, because if you make one misstep, you're screwed. This means if they are healthy and they hit CC on you, you will most likely lose a trade, potentially have to blow your summoners, and in worst case scenario, you will die in one fight. But assuming that they don't hit CC on you and they can never catch you, then poke should always win against all in. So yeah, there goes the all in. Next, we've got poke and trade versus sustain. Now, sustain will just heal up after every trade, so it doesn't really matter how much you can poke them. If they heal up, you're always gonna lose. Actually, the only way to win this is to poke them over and over again until they have no mana left to heal or shield the AD carry up. This is extremely hard though, because you can't really take too much damage in the process either, and they can like trade back with you. So generally sustain wins versus poke. And then you've got catch/all in versus sustain. Now, once the all in comp catches you, the sustain comp is done for. So generally the all in comp wins this. But of course, as I said, it's not really black and white. These aren't some rules set in stone, and it is possible to win as all in versus poke or as sustain versus all in. It's just generally harder to do. So yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something, and if you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, like this video, and turn on your notification bell. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.